Most of you, particularly in the endurance side of things, in the endurance world, would have heard the concept of 80-20. So today I'm going to break down the basics of 80-20, what it means, and how you can actually implement a bit of a strategy around it. Do we actually have to follow that method specifically, or can we just take some of the principles and then apply it in a really practical way? So we're going to break it down, 80-20 explained. Let's get into it. Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome back to the channel, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Make sure if you haven't already, please consider subscribing down below to keep supporting the channel. Got some great content coming out in the next little while and also already on the channel. So make sure you go back and have a look at some of the videos. You might have missed a couple because there's been quite a lot coming through the last little bit. And make sure, so you don't miss any videos, hit that bell icon down below to keep notified of when a video drops. Going to be quite a little bit more strategic and regular about how I get my videos out. So make sure you are getting those notifications so you know exactly when they do drop every time I put a video out. Today's video is stemming from a question in the comments and a few discussions I've had with athletes, and also off the back of a video I did the other day around athletes needing to go faster and practice going fast if they want to get faster. So I'll link that above and down the description below so you can go check it out. But it's the type of thing that off the back of that we had some interesting discussion around, well, how much high intensity or how much fast do you actually need to include in your week? And it really comes back to this 80-20 principle that a lot of us sort of know and have heard of in the industry, particularly in the endurance space, of this 80-20. But what does it actually fundamentally mean? So very simply, 80-20 is a very, I guess, broad concept of having a look at a typical training week and saying 80% of your training week should be just base, not base necessarily, but just building an aerobic endurance of some sort. So whether that is going out and doing zone 2 base case, whether you're doing maybe a little bit of tempo or some sort of a little bit, just pushing the pace a little bit, but predominantly it's your volume work essentially. We're going to have periods where we're going out and doing a big hour-and-a-half run or a 2-hour run. We might go out and do a 3, 4, 5-hour ride. Whatever you're doing, we're building a foundation from just an endurance perspective overall of just being able to complete work. So the volume part of it is the 80 because it's the type of thing at lower intensity we can tolerate more. That makes sense. If the intensity is down, I can do more of it before I'm going to start to fatigue. Pretty easy to then manage. And when we look at the bulk of the week, that's also where the hours are going to add up. If we're doing 10 hours of training in the week or 15 or 20, however many hours you're doing in the week, if you go out and do a 5-hour ride on the weekend, there's a big chunk of your training time already. You add up those other parts that are those more volume-based work. And when I say volume, we're talking long, steady state, single pace efforts for a long period of time, 40 minutes, 50 hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be. When we're building up those add up quite quickly to be the largest part of our week, but it's also very tolerable. If you adjust to do that, you could do a large amount of volume in the week and back up reasonably well. At some point, it's going to tip over because a lot of volume, obviously, and too much volume is going to tip you into things like burnout and that anyway. But it's the type of thing that if you kept balancing your week, you can do large amounts of it because the intensity is not necessarily up there. Yeah, you'll feel tired and sore because your body's just beat up from a lot of impact. If you're a runner, your arms might start getting sore. If you're a swimmer, on the bike, you might just get sore from a position, things like that. But it's a type of thing you could just repeat that effort. It feels like all day pace sometimes. So that's the 80 part of it. The 20 is then mixing in some sort of higher intensity to then allow you to, I guess, if we want to use the term polarize your training, I don't necessarily like using that because that sort of, I guess, suggests two extremes of the spectrum. But mix up the intensity, give us some sort of a different stimulus, whether it's still to achieve an aerobic adaptation, whether it's to go a little bit more anaerobic, whether it's to get better at buffering and tolerating hydrogen ions and lactic acid when it comes into the system, whether it's to get FTP up by 10 watts or VO2 max up by 30 watts, whatever your goal is here, those are at higher intensities. Those measures occur at our higher intensities. We need to then train up there to be able to do it. But the reason for it being the 20 is because we've got these other types of fatigue starting to come in. So where we start to shift is the long, slow, like I said before, is predominantly going to be things like you're going to feel sore from impact. You're going to feel sore from a different position. You're going to feel sore from just a bit of, I guess, overdoing it in terms of the muscle. Obviously, it's going to go through some sort of damage. If you swim and swim and swim, it's going to go through some sort of damage doing the volume. You're not putting it under really high stresses in terms of the forces and things like that, but you're putting it under a lot of repetitive forces. It's like anything. Things get worn out. A pair of shoes, you wear them enough for enough Ks, they're going to get worn out and you're going to have to get new ones. That's basically what we're doing with the muscles. You just wear them out, they're eventually going to blow up, essentially, and be no good. But if you balance that enough, it's going to be okay. The high intensity is taking it to a slightly different angle. We're now looking at the 20% has to we can only really go this sort of 20%, because if we do any more than that, we're now talking about different types of fatigue. No longer is it just a wear out effect, it's neuromuscular fatigue. It's how well does the nervous system actually transmit signals to the muscles, and how well can the muscles actually produce those forceful contractions to be able to maintain the quality of effort that we need. We're also starting to tap into things like more metabolic fatigue, because we're starting to work maybe in and around threshold, FTP, just above. We're now starting to talk about, well, we've got a lot of hydrogens in our system, we're doing short recoveries, we're keeping it in there. Post-session, we're going to have a lot of acidity in the legs that we're going to have to start to clear out and metabolize as we get into our recovery period. So there's all these different parts of it as well. There's also going to be higher forces through the body, particularly from a running perspective. On the bike as well, you're pushing a lot harder on the pedals, so the quads are under a lot more stress than they would be at lower intensity. Makes sense. This is the reason why we can't do necessarily as much in terms of the high intensity work throughout the week. So I guess where I'm going with this from a practical setting, 80-20 is a reasonable guide. Do you have to necessarily stick to it, bang on 80-20 and every week calculate it? No. Keep it practical. I don't go through and calculate that. I look at how an athlete handles load over a few weeks to begin with, and then we start to work off that. So as a general rule, what I'll typically look at if we're working on, say, VO2 max as an example, we're specifically targeting our ability, one, use oxygen better in terms of a process, but two, increase the rate at which we can use oxygen at the top end. So our VO2 max increases, bigger size engine. I've spoken about this before time and time again. Bigger engine allows us to do more with it. What am I going to do throughout the training week? If I'm a runner, to keep it really simple, or a cyclist or a swimmer, this is all going to apply. I'm going to prioritize my 20 first, because they're my key sessions are going to have those different types of fatigue. They're the ones that are going to be hard to back up. I can't go out and do flat out efforts at VO2 max on a Tuesday and then go and try and repeat that on a Wednesday and then repeat it on a Thursday. The neuromuscular effect and the nervous system effect, you're going to feel really flat. You're not going to be able to produce that intensity, those forceful contractions you need to. You might be a bit metabolic in the legs as well. There might be a little bit of muscle damage in terms of moving at high speed, more forces through the body, all of these factors I just talked about. So it's the type of thing that I'm going to go prioritize those. I might go, if I'm just a runner, I might go Tuesday and Thursday are going to be my high intensity days. Maybe if you really wanted to, a Saturday as well, depending on what you do. I currently at the moment, my runs are going to be Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. I'm running 3 times a week in lockdown in kind of an off-season period now, which is a weird sort of part of the year for me. But it's the type of thing I don't necessarily need to run more than that just to maintain. But I'm going a high intensity run on a Tuesday and then a high intensity run on a Saturday, because I'm used to doing a Tuesday, Thursday training night session for my football and my umpiring, and then Saturday's usually my high intensity game day, so it kind of keeps it consistent there. But it's also spacing it out throughout the week. And then I'm adding in some volume, and my 80 is things like doing a bike session on the Wednesday, doing a longer, slower run on the Thursday, going in and doing my gym sessions are kind of a mix depending on what I'm doing, but maybe adding in a second bike throughout the week on the weekend, going out and doing another long, slow run if I really wanted to. Weather's starting to warm up, so I might. The bulk of the work then gets put in second. So in terms of priority, again, high intensity gets prioritized first, because we've got more going on from a fatigue perspective and a backup perspective, and what's going to be impacted in terms of delaying recovery, things like that. Prioritize in the week. You probably only need 2 in the week in terms of high intensity sessions is more than enough for the typical athlete. If you're at the elite end of the spectrum, and when I say elite end of the spectrum, you're right at the top end of your age group, or if you're a team sport athlete, you're playing at a professional level or a sub elite level, then maybe 3 sessions you can get away with it if you cleverly space them throughout the week. Having said that though, the volume's not quite there. So I might go out and, for example, on Sunday I went and did a session, high intensity session. It didn't include a lot. I think total for the session I might have only run 3.5 Ks, which isn't a lot at all. Predominantly, I started out and did some max velocity sprinting because that's specific for what I need, but then I went and did some 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off at 120%, almost 125% of my VO2 max intensity. So it was 8 by 15 on, 15 off, short break, and repeated. That overall isn't a massive session. That, like I said, it's probably like 3.5 Ks of actual running, or not even throughout that session. A lot of it's recovery. Very short and sharp. There's my high intensity stimulus though. Compare that to if I go out and do a long, slow run, I'm going to have to go for at least 20 minutes, but at the moment I'm going out for 45 to an hour in terms of that time period. So, but it's at a much reduced intensity, so I can back that up and sustain it. That's basically what the 80-20 is talking about. It's just having a bit of split and having a bit of difference to give us some different adaptations throughout the week to lead to similar goals at the end. Doing the high intensity is going to work on the upper limits like I've spoken about before. The low intensity is going to work on that long, slow endurance. But because of the fatigue involved, having some difference in the week and some variety is really, really critical. I typically keep it quite simple and focus on 2 things at a time. You can start to mix it up and go for 3. That just depends on where you're at in your periodization style and what are you trying to achieve in your training. Some athletes might want to do 2 really high intensity, 1 kind of tempo-y and 1 long slow. That's okay. Just be mindful of where the fatigue falls in the week. But the 80-20, I guess, split of majority of your time is doing some sort of aerobic building endurance. Smaller part of your time is focused on very dedicated high intensity. But when we are focusing that dedicated high intensity, we need to make sure it's quality, not quantity. That's probably the last thing I'm going to leave you with. Make sure you actually nail those sessions, because otherwise you're kind of wasting that 20% of your week, or you're going to just let it spew into the rest of your week and you're going to over fatigue yourself. That's where you get to burnout, overtrained, all of that. Hopefully that clears it up in terms of answering that question around the 80-20. Do you use this principle? Let me know in the comments down below if you've used 80-20 or you try to follow something similar. That's how I implement and use it, but I understand everyone's going to have a different take on it. So happy to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As always, please consider subscribing to the channel to keep supporting it. Loving the feedback and all the positive support so far. That is it for today. We will leave it there and we'll see you in the next one.